Boy, it's a great sound when you hear that music, even though it stresses me out a little bit because it means I got to get my audio cues down. But for everyone else, it means we're in for a treat because it's another week of the Rec Poker Podcast, Forums Edition. I'm your host, Jim Reed. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, and of course, website AMP. So thanks for joining us this week, Rec Poker Nation. I'm Jim Reed, your host, Bluff Sterini in the home game. And as I'm a member of the Wrecking Crew, if you want to find out more about me, you can just go to rec.poker/Jim and find out all sorts of great fun things about me. I am not the only one here tonight. I just have the best job in the world. So every week I get to be joined by an illustrious panel of wizards from Rec Poker Nation. Wizards, why don't you lead us off on a little introduction of who you are and how the wonderful folks at Rec Poker can reach you?
Well, I'm Chris Jones. I'm 5x5 on PokerStars and Twitter.
And I'm John Somsky. I'm Poker Geek MN everywhere.
I'm Rob Washam, and I'm Ravman50 everywhere.
And just like every week, we are playing against each other in the nightly Rec Poker home game on Play Money PokerStars. And just like every week, we are going to take a look at a discussion post from the Rec.Poker forums. Some weeks, we get to have a little special guest join us, and this is one of those weeks. So I am very excited to introduce the brand spanking newest, most exciting member of the Wrecking Crew, the one and only Kim Kilroy, pet fed herself. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks. I don't know about the most exciting member, but I'll take it. Happy to be here. I'm really excited to be part of the Wrecking Crew and looking forward to starting some really good groups and getting into some good discussions. So I'm pet vet on at Rec Poker. I'm Fergie56 on the home game.
And you can see here, usually in the Tournament of Champions as well, in case that's where you're looking. You're going to find her around that final table pretty often as well. Thanks for joining us. Back to the show, Kim Pet Vet. So here we are. We've taken a look at a discussion post this week posted by our very own 5x5 Chris Jones. So Chris, why don't you take us through what made this spot interesting and why you decided to post it and what we can learn from it?
Yeah, I think this is, we can look at this, I think we're going to look at this specific spot, but I think the thing that I've noticed is a trend, especially in these really big online rebuy tournaments, to see people overbetting spots, 2x, 3x, 4x, even 5x shoves, and in spots to put you in really tricky decisions. Especially when it's rebuy period, I think people are trying to sort of like run up stacks and, let's just build this thing or I'll just rebuy. And, I'm always curious about what our approach is. Do we take some high variance calls with some sort of decent holdings, but not nutted holdings? And how do we approach these kinds of situations? So that's sort of the general framework, but should I run through the hand or do we want to talk about that?
Well, is there anything, we could talk a little bit at first about what we see when people make these overbets typically, or is there like a theory behind the overbets that we think people are using either correctly or incorrectly?
Well, so what I see post-flop, I think people are doing this with certain types of holdings, either high equity draws or sort of like hands that they were very excited about pre-flop that then started to get a little bit scary. So they have kings or queens and there's an ace on the flop, or it's a monotone flop, or it's they're these sort of like, well, I'm supposed to win this hand, aren't I? So I'm just going to shove. So those are the types and then pre-flop, I've been seeing people do this. I think they do it a ton with ace queen. That's what I have been like pre-flop. I see these massive shoves and I've been calling some of them down, and I see ace queen a lot.
Because that seems like a weird hand to pick for that, because it's one of those spots where you're really overbets, you're really contorting your opponent's ranges. So they're only continuing with very strong ranges. So to choose a hand like ace queen feels like an odd choice.
I think it's people, honestly, there's the incentive to build up your stack, but I think there's also a I think there's some players who maybe aren't as confident post flop or aren't as, so they've run into trouble with hands like that before, and so they're like, well, and Jacks is the other one. Jacks and Ace Queen, I think, do this, and I think they're kind of like, to heck with it. Let's just get it in. And
so, Chris, can I ask a quick question? Are you seeing the same trend after the rebuy's over, or not as much?
I don't see it as. I'd be curious what others are seeing, but I don't see it as much. So I feel like that is something to maybe pay attention to, and maybe we can call a little looser in the rebuy period, knowing that people may be doing this, without, I have yet to come across somebody who does this with like aces. So I think we can discard hands that are like truly nutted when this kind of like thing happens.
Yeah,
I saw something similar in one of the latest forum posts with people going all in pre-flop and for massive amounts while the rebuy was on. So or trying to or when the rebuy period is ending, maybe trying to double up or but with like 30, 40, 50 big blinds. So but you don't see it after.
Not normally a shove stack. 30, 40 big blinds is not normally a shove stack, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think that end of the rebuy period is kind of its own dynamic. Like that's definitely a gambly time, and it would be interesting. I haven't done any study on this at all, but it would be interesting to see what the actual right decision is in some of those spots where you do have a chance to double up your stack or essentially enter another tournament. So I guess it doesn't really matter that much, but the psychology of it is such that people are more likely to get it in. And because people are more likely to get it in light, you're kind of also incentivized to get in there a little lighter yourself, right? Because your equity increases with those hands.
Right.
And I think also the other thing is that we find ourselves in these spots where like the math probably sort of works out. Like we'll probably have enough equity to call in these spots. Even if we're behind, there's often spots where I think this hand we're going to look at, where we're going to have the right math to probably call. But does that make it do we really want to be putting in 50, 60 big blinds on a flip in a tournament where we think we might have, we might have some skill edge or maybe not, how do we make a decision? Do we just go with the math and say, well, I'm 55% here, or I'm even, I need, 40% here to call and I'm getting 30, whatever. Like, how do we equate it when it gets to this massive thing where we're still know that we're going into probably this situation where we're probably in a big flip or something like that? That's kind of the big questions that go through my mind when I'm in these spots.
Yeah, and usually you're not going to win a lot of poker tournaments calling all ins, right? Like that's just not the best way to get your last chip in the middle. Right. So it is its own kind of area of study.
Was this a knockout tournament?
No.
Great point, though, John.
Well, because that does make it a little bit of a difference. There is some value into trying to maintain a larger than average stack in a knockout tournament so that you have the ability to knock someone out when they go all in. And it gives you, and you can call a little bit wider too, because that's extra equity.
Yeah, I think that's also a good point, though. I think that the growth of knockout tournaments, I think we can talk about this, but I think that has started to influence the way people play in regular tournaments. Now people are trying these out and hearing like, you got to shove looser. You got to build up your stack. You can call lighter because you're not only playing for chips, but you're playing for those bounties. So I think that there's this incentive to do that, but I think people are maybe like saying, well, that's kind of fun. I like getting my chips in the middle. So, and sort of adopting that lesson into sort of even some of their regular tournaments too.
So was that Jim Reed?
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, I feel seen. Yeah, I think there is kind of that similar. It's kind of a similar dynamic, isn't it? Near the end of the rebuy period, where people feel like, well, there's just like I have this excuse to get in a little lighter here. And that is kind of similar of those knockout tournaments, those bounty tournaments as well. So let's.
I've been playing a lot of sit and goes lately, and I played in one the other day that it would happen to be twice, where on the flop I got a massive overbet. When I had I had the goods, and I'm betting out my normal C bet, and I get just like 8 times my bet over the top, and on a board that I don't understand what they could possibly have. I was totally confused.
Yep.
So let's take that. That's the segue I'm looking for, Rob, because the overbets pre-flop are one thing, but I think the dynamic's totally different. The factors are different. We're going to look at a hand here where the overbet is post-flop, and I think people think about that in almost in a more like in a binary way. These tend to be well, we talked about it before. For me, you can write this down, everybody. I don't. For me, these are almost always going to be low showdown value, high equity draws, where I don't really care if you're fold or not. I don't really care if you know what my hand is or not. If the only way to exploit me is by calling with a made hand that I'm doing pretty well against, that's a good kind of exploit that I'm going to make you want to take. But I'm very interested to see what other people think about these overbets post flop and that kind of thing.
So I can walk us through the hand really quickly. In some respects, I kind of wish I would have found, because I have lots of examples of this. And the one I posted is a multi-way spot. And I think it just muddies the water, because I think I see this in heads up as well. But we'll go with what we've got. So this is a hand we're playing. We're at the 150-300 level. And we're sitting with a stack of 23,000, so fairly deep stacked in the small blind, and we are holding 9 of spades, 9 of hearts, and so the under the gun 1 player opens 3x to 900. Let's see, under the gun 3. Then calls for 900, and this is a spot where we could probably squeeze quite nicely with our 9s. Looking back, I kind of wish I would have, but I didn't. So I flatted, and I think that's probably a mistake. Ultimately, without some sort of a read on the players, it allows the big blind to come along, but we wouldn't have been in this spot if we had played it perfectly. So we'll skip that part and we'll move on to the big blind does come along. So we're going 4-way to a flop with our 9 of spades, 9 of hearts. And the flop comes 10 of diamonds, 10 of spades, 8 of diamonds. We, with our pair of 9s, we check. The big blind checks. The under the gun 1 player bets small, bets about 2,000 into this pot. The second player folds, and then we elect with our 9s to flat. And this is where the player behind us, the big blind, wakes up and shoves all in for about 20K.
And for the listeners, so the original Razor C-bet, you called, and then the big blind player makes this overbet shove check raise. Okay. And the board's 10,
was
10, 8.
exactly
Half
the
pot.
C-bet was exactly half pot, according to Kim. I wanted to bring that up.
Hit the button.
Hit the button.
Just hit the button.
Half pot.
So easy to do, Kim. All you do is hit the button.
So what's everyone thinking at this point? So let's put ourselves in Chris's shoes. So this big blind has
Did
check
I say
raise.
what the flop was?
10 of diamonds, 10 of spades, 8 of diamonds. So there's 2 diamonds and there's 2 10s. Is there anything that we can just reject out of hand from their hand right here? Like if I had quad 10s, I would not over bet jam here. I don't think. What about other combos? What about just naked 10s? Or what, pocket 8s? Can we lop off kind of the top of their range here when they make this overbet shove? What do you think?
I think it's reasonable to lop those off. I think that very, very few players would ever make that overbet.
Mm-hmm.
with
think so,
either, of those hands.
And the problem is on this board, like 10, 10, 8, if we're saying, well, they don't have a 10 and they don't have pocket eights, so then what what do they have? So it's got to be something like, I don't know. I mean, like, I guess for me, again, I think it's some draw. So 2 diamonds, or there's some straight draws there. There's some overcards. What does the panel think from when it comes to those combos? Would you play those combos this way?
I could see some like Jack 10 of hearts kind of doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So they have the 10, they don't have any spades, they don't have any diamonds, and they don't want to see any more cards. So I can see that happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'd be tempted to do it with like Jack Queen of diamonds or 9 Jack of diamonds. Maybe those would be some obvious ones for me, where I felt like I had a lot of outs, but wasn't going to win the hand without making the nuts or everybody folding.
Would you really do it?
Yeah,
I mean, I would, because I probably would, because I have a problem. But
that's right. You like going all in, don't you?
I mean, it's a nice pot by then. By the time that C bet gets called by Chris, I mean, there's a pretty big pot. And if I feel like, I mean,
the pot has 26.3 big blinds in it.
Right. Yeah. So that's substantial.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Do you think we can ever see jacks here?
I was thinking about, like, an overpair was the next thing I wanted to ask about, because it's got a lot to gain from protection, right?
It does.
And it's still gonna get, I mean, does it get called from behind? Does it get called by worse? I guess we're not saying it has to be a good value bet. We're just saying, does it?
Well, and it's also got to be, so like you have to get to jacks here in a 4-way pot, and you close the action. As the big blind.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, granted, I flatted with 9, so I mean, some players might, but I think if I had jacks in a big blind here, I think most players are going to 3-bet. But I mean, I think some players could end up with jacks here, and then be like, this board's scary. Mm-hmm. But then with 2 callers, I don't know. It would just be, I think you're spewing chips, but it doesn't mean players won't do it. So maybe they can have jacks.
I guess the nice thing about having a jack or a 9 in your hand is that you're blocking the combos of 10s that your villain could have. I mean, by the time it goes bet call here, the other people in the hand are showing some strength. So being able to make it less likely that they have a 10 increases the odds of that being, dead money in the middle.
Yeah, the funny thing is, Chris is really blocking the 10s with his 9s.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There, maybe Jack 10s are out there, but 9 10s there's no 9 10s out there anymore, because he's got 2 of the 9s.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Which is too bad, because it means you're also blocking some of those straight draws that we wanted him to be shoving. So that's interesting. And
the other thing about my hand is I do not have the 9 of diamonds. So it's if we're gonna like say that this is a lot of high equity draws in this spot, which I think is a very reasonable. I mean, I think there are maybe a few overpairs like jacks. There's maybe a few things like there's a few 10s in range, but I think we're pretty close in saying this is a lot of high equity draws. This is a lot of like, Jack 9s, 9 7s of diamonds, 2 diamonds with at least some gut shot available to it as well. Possibly the great combo draws that have the open ender and the diamonds.
The ace, not diamond
or nut diamonds. Yeah, those might be there as well. And if we look at it specifically, and this is where I think the decision gets really challenging. When we look at those kinds of hands against pocket 9s, we're really in like full on coin flip range. Like we're about a 50-50 coin flip if you run the equity on 9s versus say all those diamond things. If we take out things like full houses and 10s, we're really and we only need like 40% to call here. Like we're getting the right we're getting the right odds to call. So, but does that mean we should?
And it's really interesting because it's this spot where, and we've talked about this before. The paired board kind of changes the dynamic a bit here. But if in a lot of situations, if you have two overcards to the board and a flush draw, you're actually ahead of a lot of one pair hands on that board. So by the time the equity gets realized, if you get all the way to showdown, more than half the time the player with the very strong draw is actually going to win that hand. It's a little complicated with the paired board, and it's also complicated when your opponent's holding a pocket pair like Chris is here. But
and the equities on these two hands, they're 52-48, so really a coin flip virtually.
Yeah.
So.
And so then the question is, how do you want to embrace this variance, I guess, in this part of the tournament?
Right.
You certainly have the right odds to call.
Right. So then does that mean we just embrace the variance and just, is that what we're, I mean, like, cause like, I'm a math guy, but then it just somehow it feels wrong. It feels like, am I really supposed to be putting in, what is this? This is a shove for 20. So this is like a 60 big blind shove. Am I doing, that's about right? It's like, it's a little less. It's like 58 big blinds. So we just embrace that variance and be like, well, we're going to win this enough time to justify making this call. So let's go.
Is there anything we can do to range this player in a way that makes it an easier decision one way or the other? Like we've already said they don't have the strongest hands. Do we think they're doing it with like any air balls, like with no equity at all? Are we really?
Do we have any stats? Do we have any stats on this guy? I mean, are you running
this player was definitely aggressive, like looser than I think I would recommend. They were probably pipping something, if I remember, it was in the 30 some percent. So it was low 30s though, not like ridiculous, but it was high. And so they're somebody who gets into pots and probably, can't resist, being, and they had,
you don't have to just really call me out by name, Chris. Jeez.
Like there are some like certain giveaways, the icon that you choose on ACR, because you could choose different like characters or whatever. And I find that the people who have some of the like, not, if some of our audience has this, great, you're doing great. But like if they choose the Rock, the actor, the Rock as their persona, like I feel like those players are more likely to shove light.
Yeah, they're not actually rocks.
Yeah.
So did I ask you, if you have that person to your left and you have those stats on him, would that be more of a reason to 3-bet pre-flop?
Probably, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're looking at those stats, but I would ask.
Yeah.
For what you're asking, I would say you have to look at what the buy-in was of this tournament, whether you're willing to rebuy, and then decide whether it's a time to take on the variance or not. So.
Yep.
And
nice.
I just fold.
You're turning down a small edge, Rob, because you want to find a better spot later in the tournament?
Correct.
Well, he actually studies Tommy Angelo, so that's his
exactly.
That's true.
Fold so you can come back and fold again.
yes. Yeah, that's it.
I guess one question I'd have is how skilled are you at playing the big stack? Because if there are players who wield a big stack like a hammer, and just clobber the competition. So if that is your style of play, then your overall EV may be dramatically higher if you have a big stack and that's one of your strengths. If it's not, then, you probably want to play a little bit more, or not embrace the variance as much.
That's a great point. And the thing about this post that really interested me is that we are putting this opponent on a pretty predictable range here. So we're saying they're not doing it with the nuts. They're not doing it with like middle range holdings either. It's a lot of draws, which means that their showdown value is 0. And it's a great example of how you can have a predictable range that is nevertheless very difficult to play against.
Right. Like there's no possible way that this person shows up with like ace 8, right? There's no like, can you imagine a world where they show up with a single 8?
I mean, I can't imagine a world where that seems like a good decision. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but I don't know. The problem is the calling range, right? Like that's the real problem, is that the calling range to this play is so tight that you only like, I don't know. This is this is why it's a good spot, Chris. What are the value hands? Okay, let's think about this way then. What are the value hands that you're making this play with? And we can, I mean,
As the shover.
As the shover. Yeah, as the shover.
I mean, I think Kim's right. I think it's a few combos of some random 10s that are kind of scared of this board. So they're like Jack 10 without any kind of future flush equity.
It could all be Jack 10, Queen 10, King 10, Ace 10 of hearts specifically that don't have that, or clubs. No, clubs. Yeah. Clubs or hearts, so they don't have any backdoor flush draws.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, if I have Jack 10 on this board, I'm kind of thrilled to get a little bit more value than to show 60 big blinds into the middle. But because I've seen two people bet into this, I feel like, boy, I'm not sure the best way to do this is to take these people who are mildly interested in this pot and tell them to go away. But some people do kind of play a little bit more scared of this, so it's possible.
You'd be surprised how many people play like that.
Yeah,
overbets. Right. When they've hit the board, but they're afraid of giving anybody any more cards.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've seen somebody flop a full house and then go all in because they just want to end it right now. They don't want anything to happen. And it's like, wow, you're not getting any value at all because everybody knows that you've got the stone cold nuts. So
take the money and run.
Right.
Exactly. But one time in 1973, they got sucked out on their full house.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, let's see if our friend Jonathan Little has any insight to lend on this particular subject, and then we'll come right back and get back into this.
Have you ever wondered whether you should call a preflop raise or 3-bet instead? What do you do when you have a flush draw? Do you raise it or do you just call? What do you do with ace king when you miss the flop? Are you tired of guessing about what the right play is with your particular hand? Well, my name is Jonathan Little, and I am a 2-time World Poker Tour champion and creator of PokerCoaching.com, where we offer over 1,000 interactive hand quizzes where you play a hand and then get real-time feedback from our world-class pros. Don't guess and don't stress. Just register for your free account at PokerCoaching.com/recpoker right now.
I'd do it, folks. I'd go there right now and do it. He sounds like he's getting angry, and you do not want to see Jonathan Little when he's upset. So, yes, I feel like I don't know. It feels like calling is the right. Like I'm with you, Chris. I feel like you kind of have to trust the math. Like when the math tells you that there's an edge here, you should have a reason. You should have a good reason not to do it,
right.
And. Your tournament life is a good reason if you have a skill edge to express later in the tournament. So like that makes sense to me.
Or if you're in like, if you're in a once in a lifetime, you're going to the main event, you've satellited into something that you'll never rebuy yourself into, them preserving tournament life is, this was I think a $15 ACR tournament that, I'll buy another one if I miss this. And I did end up calling because I'm also kind of curious about these spots.
Sure.
Like I am. Part of it was scientific. Like, what am I going to find here? Am I ever going to find extreme value? And if I ever start seeing people having extreme value, it might start to change my play. But I did call.
Spoiler, how'd it go?
I ended up winning. He showed 9-7 of diamonds, so he had that super combo draw
Straight flush draw.
Yep, straight flush draw. In fact, and run out came 4 clubs, queen of hearts, which is good for nines. That's good for him.
Yeah, you were even blocking that straight flush draw, and he still had it. That's amazing. Yeah, good point.
So this time you won, next time you won't, and it'll go back and forth.
Right.
But I think it's really important what we were saying about the buy-in level. Like if you're in if you're in a $1,500 live event with 45-minute blind levels or hour blind levels, you're not going to probably take a marginal spot like this.
Right.
So.
So we got some good comments in. I want to draw attention to Tron Vidar Stensby, who put some thoughts in here about how it kind of caps the range of the opponent. And Tron Vidar also prefers the 3-bet pre-flop, which makes a lot of sense. Steve Fredland has a couple comments in here about how the overbet shoves tend to be pretty obvious draws to him. And I would say to you, Steve, even when it's pretty obvious, that doesn't make it easy to play against, though, does it? As we've just pointed out here. So Phil Fuhrer, Eric Anderson also made some great comments in here. And I encourage everyone, we kind of browse the forum post to bring some of the points here on the air, but go to rec.poker, get a free community account, go over and check out the forum post for yourself. The name of this forum post is Massive Overbet Shoves. And on that note, does anyone have any final thoughts on Massive Overbet Shoves? One of these days, we're going to do another episode on micro bets, because we talked about that in one of our first episodes. And it's a really interesting corollary to this strat chat here that we've just had. So maybe one of these days soon we'll talk about micro bets. But in the meantime, I would like to thank Chris Jones, Kim, John, Rob, website AMP, Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack and Casino, and of course Steve Fredland and the rest of Rec Poker Nation. See you again soon.